Please take your seats. Dear Mr. President, Your Excellencies, dear members of Philippine delegation, dear Mr. Lienhardt, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome you, President Aquino, on behalf of Körber Foundation. We are delighted that you took the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the Republic of the Philippines and the Federal Republic of Germany as an occasion to travel to Berlin. It's a great honor for us that you are using your visit to enter into a dialogue with all of us here about the economic and security policy future of the Philippines and about the opportunities that arise for cooperation with Germany and Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, the Körber Foundation is able to look back on a long tradition. For more than 50 years, we have been committed to make a contribution to a better international understanding. We seek the open exchange, talking with each other and not about each other. This was the philosophy of our founder, Kurt Körber. It is especially in the exchange between Europe and Asia that this need for dialogue remains high. A few years ago, we took the strategic decision to shift the focus of our activities in the area of international politics in the direction of Asia. We also decided that we do not only want to deal with China and its rise to a world power. Rather, we want to address the entire region. Last year, our Bergedorf Roundtable, the oldest project of Körber Foundation, convened in Indonesia, and we dealt with the issue of peace and security in the Asia-Pacific. Another milestone in our work on the subject of Asia was a speech by the Chinese State President Xi Jinping, who addressed the subject of China's role in the world in Berlin just a few months ago, at the invitation of our foundation. And just a few days ago, we were able to welcome the President of Myanmar as our guest. One thing has become clear at all of these events. Often we, meaning Europeans and Asians, are still distant. Often the problems and challenges don't seem to affect the other directly. In times of the Islamic State, the Ukrainian crisis, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the domestic struggle in Libya, it is not easy for us in Europe to cast our eyes even farther towards the East. At the moment, the immediate neighborhood of Europe demands our full attention. And still, it is essentially important for us to follow the challenges and opportunities in the Asia-Pacific closely. It is the most dynamic region of the world economically, with growth rates of which we may only dream in Europe currently. And it is a region with a complex security policy environment full of tension. The many conflicts in the South China Sea have become a regular feature also in the German and the European press. These conflicts are of direct interest to us, as they do not only concern questions of the international order and the application of international law, but also of the freedom of trade routes and the safety of the world seas. The Philippines play an important role in Southeast Asia. A young, motivated and highly efficient population of more than 100 million, good education and the existence of important raw materials are core elements of the current economic success. At the same time, the Philippine government is undertaking great efforts to stabilize the domestic political situation through negotiations and autonomy treaties. Mr. President, we look forward to elaborate on all these subjects together with you, and we would like to express our gratitude for your readiness to engage in a discussion with us following your speech. I would like to thank the Asian Pacific Committee of German Business and the Philippine Embassy for the excellent cooperation in the organization of this event. Madam Ambassador, Dr. Lienert, thank you very much. And of course, I would like to thank all of you who have taken the time to be here, and I'm happy to welcome you all as our guests. Thank you very much.
Dear President Aquino, dear Ambassador Navidad, lieber Herr Staatssekretär Beckmeyer, lieber Herr Ambassador Olsowski, lieber Herr Wehmeyer, ladies and gentlemen. As already has been mentioned, this is a very important year in our bilateral relationship between the Philippines and Germany, since we celebrate in October the 60 years of diplomatic relations. I believe the two countries have developed strong political, economic, social and cultural ties. Therefore, your visit, Mr. President, is very well timed. The Asia-Pacific Committee of the German Business is pleased to host today, together with the Körber Foundation, this renowned foundation, this event here. The Asia-Pacific Association is carried by the German industry and its special interest groups, and is the platform for all events, for all subjects the German industry is concerned or is busy with in relation with Asia. The German Business Association is clearly of the opinion that the coming zone of the world future is Asia. We believe that anybody, as a company who is not located and has not a home in Asia, will in the future become insignificant. And we believe also that we can master this task, not to become insignificant, only jointly between business and the German politics. We want to work together with our Asian partners in order to find ways to better understand each other and to utilize this growth in Asia, and we want to utilize that without weakening the German industry basis. And in this area between politics and business is where we from the Asia-Pacific Association see our main role. We see us as an intermediator, we see us as a translator, and we see us also as an advisor. And to me, the growth in Asia without weakening the location in Germany also means that we cannot have a one-way street. From Germany to Asia, we want to have this in two directions. And therefore, we have the intention to attract as many Asian companies, as many Philippine companies, to also become at home in our country. We at the Asia Pacific Association, we will work hard to establish a situation that foreign companies feel very comfortable, feel at home and feel welcomed in Germany. And we believe that nothing can substantiate our demands in Asia better than the freedom that Asian companies enjoy in Germany to do their business. And at the same time, German companies in Asia, German companies in Philippines, we always give our subsidiaries 100% access to our IP. We let them have the IP. So with a German company, German IP becomes present in your country. We train our employees. We train and develop our sub-suppliers, and through us, a lot of added value and a lot of technology becomes home in your country. And since this is the case, and since German companies do this for many years all throughout Asia, this is also why we say those companies deserve to be regarded as local companies by our Asian partners, even if they are held by a German mother. We believe this cooperation gives us an enormous amount of benefits for both sides. And therefore, we have put in the Asia-Pacific Association our credo in 3 words. We want partnership, we want equality, and we want sustainable development for both sides. And I believe that the Philippines are a good example here as in becoming an increasingly important partner for Germany. In 2013, your country was one of the fastest growing economy in Asia. And since growth always generates new business opportunities for local and for foreign investors, we believe this is a good place. We are one of the biggest investors, especially in the IT service out of Europe, and your country has become quite popular among German companies as a location for business process outsourcing, the so-called BPOs. And Mr. President, we encourage you to continue these efforts you have done in your tenure to make business and make investments in your country easier. And perhaps what you have set up in the PESA zone and in the through PESA could also be applied for companies who want to go to your country not for export, but for being a local company in supplying to the Philippines, and we believe that could even increase the foreign direct investments from many small and medium-sized companies in your country. And we can provide, as German companies, state-of-the-art technology, like in renewable energy generation, in urbanization, in public transportation, and in general in the modernization and new building of the infrastructure. And we are ready as to be a partner to help you with specific needs. Your country is part of a very vibrant region, the ASEAN region, and we are keen to learn more about this region and your country in particular. We look closely at this establishment of the ASEAN Economic Community next year, and we believe that the potential for further economic and political integration in your region is enormously high. As a last point, let me mention this year the Asia-Pacific Association holds its semi-annual conference, the Asia-Pacific Conference of German Businesses in November 20 to 22 in Vietnam. It shows the importance the German business community places to the Asia-Pacific region. We are hosting this conference to gain better understanding of the trends and perspectives in Asia economics and to continue the dialogue with our Asian partners. And we would be very, very pleased if representatives from your government could help us in sessions to understand ASEAN even better. Now, we will now start the dialogue today with the Philippines and with you as their president. And Mr. Aquino, Mr. President, we are very keen to listen to your words now. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. 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 Thank you very
Dr. Klaus Weimer, Dr. Hubert Linhard, Dr. Thomas Paulsen, Ambassador Thomas Osowski, Ambassador Maria Cleofit Natividad, honorable members of the Philippine delegation, leaders from the business community, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On March 21, 1887, a novel entitled Noli Me Tangere, or in English, Touch Me Not, was published here in Berlin. It was written by a then 27-year-old Filipino doctor, artist, and visionary named Jose Rizal. Dr. Rizal spent 2 years in Germany. Short on funds, he rationed his biscuits for meals, and to stave off loneliness, he wrote poems about the flowers of Heidelberg, translated Schiller's William Tell into his native Tagalog, and drew ideas from Berlin's libraries. Along with his fellow Filipinos, he engaged in discourse with the intellectuals of Europe, applying the ideas of the Enlightenment to his own context back home, and pursued discussions about their shared values and aspirations for humanity. Noli Me Tangere was Dr. Rizal's first novel. It offered a candid look at the ills of Filipino society under colonial rule. It shed light on the abuses of the colonizers and on our people's collective longing for freedom and dignity. Scholars consider it the first articulation of a Filipino national consciousness. The novel eventually earned the ire of the authorities, and after some time in exile, Dr. Rizal would be arrested and martyred by a firing squad on the 30th of December, 1896. Dr. Rizal's ideas, works, and ultimately his death sparked a revolution for Philippine independence. Since then, the world has recognized Rizal's greatness. In fact, my second official function during this European trip was to lay a wreath at a monument for Dr. Jose Rizal built by the Spanish government in Madrid. Today, more than 127 years after the Noli Me Tangere emerged from a Berlin press, I stand before you as President of the first democratic and constitutional republic in Asia, one in which every generation has been challenged by Rizal's words, and I quote, "There can be no tyrants where there are no slaves," close quote. In our generation, we have re-articulated this challenge in a battle cry that resonated in our last presidential elections, wherein we said, "Where there is no corruption, there will be no poverty." From the beginning of our term, we have stayed true to our promise. We have brought the moral imperatives of justice, transparency, and accountability back into the equation of governance. We have plugged bureaucratic leakages and strengthened public institutions. A good example of our reform efforts is our overhaul of the Philippine budgeting process. Our administration has adopted what we call the zero-based budgeting, which involves reviewing all government projects, axing the ones that provide little to no benefit to our countrymen, while keeping and even strengthening the ones that had great positive effect. We pursued all those who committed wrongdoing, regardless of their wealth or influence. When evidence of plunder and electoral sabotage were found against my predecessor in the presidency, corresponding charges were filed, and now she is under arrest, waiting to face due process of our court systems. When it was proven that the sitting Chief Justice of our Supreme Court failed to declare 98% of his assets in his Statement of Assets and Liabilities, as our Constitution requires him to do, like-minded reformists in Congress removed him from office by following constitutionally ordained proceedings. These instances, among others, sent a clear message. The rule of law applies to all. We cannot stress enough the importance of adhering to the rule of law. A nation's laws, after all, encapsulate that nation's set of values and aspirations. This same idea applies to international law, which reflects the collective values and aspirations of humanity, and is meant to guarantee that relationships are established and dictated not through might, but through a commonality in values and a recognition that we are all inhabitants of one world. We are all aware that tensions in South China Sea have created uncertainty in our region. This uncertainty poses threats to the rule of law. My country stands firmly in the belief that the only sustainable, peaceful, and dignified resolution to any debate lies not in belligerence, deception, displays of military might, or surreptitious actions meant to shape the situation in the waters, but in reasonably laying out our arguments before an impartial arbiter. As descendants of the seafaring Austronesian peoples, Filipinos have for millennia viewed the South China Sea as a region vital to the livelihood, security, and cultural identity of those who live around it. It is thus an imperative for us to oppose by every peaceful, legal, and diplomatic means possible any attempt by any country to claim these waters solely as their own. To this end, we are taking two tracks. First, we continue to promote the formulation of a binding code of conduct for the South China Sea. And second, we are pursuing arbitration to clarify the maritime entitlements for all countries concerned. This is a mechanism embedded in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We continue to invite other claimant countries to join us so that together we may expand avenues to arrive at a peaceful resolution to this long-standing dispute. Ladies and gentlemen, if it is true that international law embodies our consensus as co-inhabitants in a single global community, then it stands to reason that violating it means flouting not just a single nation, but the entire community of nations. Conversely, observing international law strengthens a dynamic harmony among nations, which then could be harnessed to uplift the lives of all. I believe that the heads of government whom I have had the honor of meeting on this particular trip have reaffirmed these ideas, as they manifested support for the peaceful resolution of disputes on the South China Sea based on international law. The maintenance of stability creates an environment conducive to unhampered and inclusive growth. Today, my country is on the cusp of an era of even greater potential for progress. By 2015, or next year, the Philippines will be hitting a demographic sweet spot, which means that the majority of our population will be of working age. Studies show that countries who hit this sweet spot grow by an average of 7.3% over the 10 years that immediately follow. This is why we have been, and we continue, to invest heavily in areas that will increase opportunities for all our countrymen. Our administration's commitment to transparency and accountability has allowed us to unlock resources which we have spent on improving the lives of our people. Perhaps the most prominent example of this is our conditional cash transfer program, the recipients of which we increased from less than 800,000 households in 2010 to more than 4 million this year. The idea is simple. As long as their children are sent to school, vaccinated, and as long as pregnant mothers get regular health checkups, then they will receive a regular cash grant from the government. The program ticks all of the boxes. It gives those in the margins additional resources to get by, it ensures that they remain healthy, and it allows their children to receive a more complete education. In fact, this year, we have further expanded this program to include households with children from ages 15 to 18. The decision comes about because of a study conducted by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, which revealed that high school graduates make about 40% more than those who only get to finish the elementary years. Of course, we are matching these efforts with significant improvements in the system of education. Since entering office, we have addressed the 2010 backlog we inherited in classrooms, which amounted to 66,800 units. We have done the same with the backlogs in textbooks and school seats. We have likewise passed a law updating our basic education cycle to be at par with global standards. To equip our people with the skills to take advantage of the opportunities that arise, we have empowered agencies such as the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, which spearheads the skills training and livelihood initiatives of government. For example, TESDA's Training for Work Scholarship Program alone has benefited 632,105 graduates as of June 2014. A recent study shows that 68.5% of the program's 2012 graduates found employment within 6 months. The rest, meanwhile, are being assisted by the agency in their search for employment. Protecting the interests of the people, of course, involves securing them in times of disaster. We are determined to confront the new normal of climate change with foresight. Our country is hit by an average of 20 storms a year, which is why from the beginning of our administration, we have upgraded our technological capacities to allow us to better prepare for incoming storms. We have installed several Doppler radars in strategic areas around the archipelago, enabling us to better estimate rainfall amounts, and we have used LiDAR technology to map the topography of our river systems and as part of a project named NOAA. We have put up a website through which anyone with an internet connection can access real-time weather information. With the technological wherewithal that we now have, we are able to better position personnel, rescue equipment, relief goods in the event of a natural disaster, and of course, to move populations to safer areas. However, one of the hardest lessons our administration has learned is that there are times when no amount of preparation is enough. In November of last year, 44 out of 81 of our provinces were ravaged by Typhoon Haiyan, which according to some was the strongest storm ever to make landfall in recorded history. Indeed, it was a storm on a scale that we had never seen before. It swept away many of the goods we had pre-positioned, much of the necessary equipment for relief operations, and even some of our first responders, among them our Secretaries of Defense and of the Interior and local government, who flew into areas in the typhoon's path the day before it made landfall, were put in danger. I am thankful for the solidarity of the international community, who helped us get back on the road to recover sooner rather than later. Germany was one of those that extended significant aid to my people. In the wake of the typhoon, we received a significant amount in aid and assistance from the German public. It was, I am told, the highest recorded amount of donations given by German citizens to a foreign country. In fact, we also have to thank the German government. Truly, Filipinos will never forget your kindness and compassion. The task at hand for us now is clear. We must not allow ourselves to be mired in a vicious cycle of destruction and mere reconstruction. We have to build back, and we have to build back better. This means constructing more resilient infrastructure and communities in more strategic areas so that we can minimize the impact of future disasters. Moving forward, we are likewise seeking to foster more vibrant and more inclusive economies in the area. We are also taking long-term measures to address climate change. As early as now, we are taking steps to embark on a low-emission development strategy. I am certain that everyone here recognizes the challenge of utilizing such technologies. After all, Europe, and in particular Germany, is one of the leaders in renewable energy. And you know how costly and complex such a strategy is. This is why today I am also hopeful that we can find partners in this particular sector who can find methods to pursue energy production that is clean, efficient, and affordable. Addressing our people's vulnerabilities, investing in their strengths, and reforming the way our government works are vital cornerstones of our development strategy. This strategy is working, and the world has taken notice. In 2013, the Philippine economy grew by 7.2%, making us one of the best-performing economies in Asia. Average GDP growth from 2010 to 2013 stands at 6.3%, a significant increase from the 4.3% recorded from 2006 to 2009. Furthermore, since my administration took office, we have received 20 positive credit ratings actions from agencies around the world, the most significant of which were granted last year when Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch unanimously declared us investment grade. This took place when the global economy was in turmoil, and the credibility of the ratings agencies themselves were being questioned. Even if they took a very conservative approach to evaluating us and to evaluating risk, they still deigned to upgrade us. There is no doubt in my mind that our two countries are more than capable of mutually beneficial engagement. Germany is our biggest trade partner in Europe, and German investments are well represented in many major sectors. I am certain many Filipinos, and perhaps many Germans as well, are expecting even greater things from a strengthened partnership as we build new platforms to deepen our economic and people-to-people ties. These include so-called Triple Win project we signed last year, which facilitates the entry of Filipino nurses into Germany, as well as the Social Security Agreement we concluded this morning. We have gone a long way in the past few decades. In 1986, my mother, Aquino, was catapulted to the presidency through the bloodless EDSA People Power Revolution. Just 3 years after that, she visited Germany in July of 1989, and a few months later, the Berlin Wall fell. It was a time when our two countries, both having suffered through dictatorships, could recognize and celebrate the values that we share. Excuse me. My apologies. those that we share the values of freedom, democracy, the rule of law. Just one generation removed from my mother's visit, the Philippine resurgence is now in full swing. The empowerment of the people in 1986, most profoundly manifested then in our newfound freedoms, now finds new meaning in the economic empowerment being engendered in our society. We have recovered from the scourge of dictatorship and from periods of self-serving leadership. We have fostered a positive shift in the national psyche. Optimism among the Filipino people and the international community is very high. Opportunities are expanding, and our government continues to move towards progress with the interest of the Filipino people as its North. I'm really sorry. As its North Star. We are extremely confident that if we continue nurturing our shared values and deepening our engagement, we can look back generations from now and see this meeting in Berlin as yet another turning point, the moment when the world ignited new dynamic synergies to bring about mutual success and prosperity that is felt by more and more citizens of a world where indeed no one will be left behind. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Mr. President, we thank you very much for your speech. We are very grateful to you that we have time to have a discussion with you here on the stage, but also with the audience here. So I will start with a couple of questions here, and then I would like to open the floor and ask you to ask questions or give us your comments. Mr. President, you have mentioned in your speech that you believe in international arbitration and international law as the right way to deal with disputes, territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Now, we all know that China does not accept international arbitration in these issues and rather prefers to deal with each country on a bilateral basis. 93% of your citizens in a recent poll by Pew Research are afraid of war resulting from these conflicts in the South China Sea. So we have quite a tense security situation. On the other hand, economic relations with China are flourishing. So China is becoming more and more key to the economic well-being of regional countries and also for your country. So my question is, how long can you really keep the both areas separate? And how long can you really successfully manage this balancing act between security considerations on the one hand and economic considerations on the other? Because there might be some point where either the security situation is negatively affecting the economic relations or vice versa, the economic dependence on China will compromise your stance in security.
We were fortunate that, like the rest of the world, prior to our taking office, we were very low on everybody's radar. So, and I think this might surprise a lot of people, that in 2011, we visited China on a state visit, and there we had a dialogue. Then President Hu Jintao said, this shouldn't be the sum total of our relations, and we agree with that. Now, the part that I think will come as a surprise is that in terms of economic relations, in 2011, if I remember correctly, they had invested in the Philippines about a total of $600 million. The Philippines, in turn, invested in China to the tune of $2.4 billion. The Philippines now has a population of 100 million. They have a 1.3 billion population. So they sent 200,000 tourists to us, and we sent 800,000 tourists to them. So my appeal to them was, all of us are supposed to strive for our people's prosperity, and prosperity cannot happen in a situation of instability. Now, if may we ask if you have time to Google search the so-called 9-dash line. Our understanding is that sometime in 1947, a functionary of General Chiang Kai-shek's government took out a map and drew several lines on this map, which are now the basis of the 9-dash line. So even if we were just to acquiesce, okay, everything within the line is yours, we're not exactly sure where the lines start and where they end. And when you map out a geographical location, I understand in the Philippines, and I'm sure in a lot of other places in the world, you delineate the boundaries by connecting points and not dashes. So is this a movable goal? Is this a movable a parameter that is subject to change depending on their needs? Now, we are signatories to UNCLOS, they are signatories to UNCLOS. UNCLOS is supposed to have been an agreement entered into voluntarily by all states that are parties to it that delineates obligations towards each other and rights and responsibilities. Now, we are granted a 200-mile exclusive economic zone. The internal also granted a 200-mile exclusive economic zone. And perhaps one of the most important points that we cannot agree with is solve the problem bilaterally. In the Spratleys Islands chain alone, which is in the South China Sea, there are 6 claimant countries, 4 of them alone from the ASEAN. So we keep asking with intermediaries that they send, how does a situation where 2 parties agree to a solution bind the 4 other parties who were not even part of the dialogue? So do we solve it temporarily as far as the 2 are concerned and make it impossible to solve for the other 4 concerned? So we have been suggesting the multilateral problem has to be settled multilaterally also. Now, on the question of can our economy withstand it, I am tasked by our Constitution to protect our territory to the furthest extent that I can. We still adhere to that belief that this particular tension should not be the be-all and end-all of our relations with China. But at the same time, if we merely acquiesce in, yes, okay, you're the bigger country, you're the military power, you have everything, and we have nothing except what we believe is the right, afforded us and that you have agreed to, especially when you said adhere to international law, and the international law applicable is UNCLOS. So at the end of the day, if we seek not to protect our rights, then we will lose them because we don't think anybody else will rise up to protect the rights which we chose not to defend. And that is important. Now, it behooves us to really expand our trade relations with everybody willing and eager to trade with us, perhaps to give us that degree of independence that we need to chart our own course. Thank you, sir.
If you say that it's in your interest to enlarge trade relations with everybody, we are all aware about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Initiative from the United States. And I think there's also a possibility or interest from the Philippines, obviously, about this partnership. But do you think that it's the right way to build such a economic partnership endeavor in Asia around the United States initiative, or should rather be China taking the initiative to build such a economic partnership area? Because China, as you know, is not part of the TPP.
Presently, we're not yet being formally invited to join the TPP. But when I was studying economics in college, I was told that expanding your markets is a necessary good factor, or necessarily good factor to continue growth. So should it be based on one or the other superpower is, I think, secondary to, does it really redound to benefit for all parties concerned? And presently, there are constitutional issues that have to be threshed out by our legal luminaries to determine whether or not we can qualify on the terms and conditions of this arrangement. But as a general principle, the Philippines would not want to shirk away from being part of the larger market that these trade agreements do facilitate.
Let me ask you one question that reached us via Twitter. It comes from Zebulon Karlander, and it says, Mr. President, what role do you believe the European Union should play in the Southeast Asia region? And I might add, do you see any role of the European Union beyond humanitarian aid, trade, and investment, for example, in security policy?
Sir, when we were, I was listening to the earlier, the welcome remarks, and the nations, well, the world's flashpots, Libya, Syria, Iraq, the Ukraine, all of these places, unfortunately, the Philippines finds itself involved in. In the Ukraine, we have 108 citizens in Kiev. In Liberia, we are part of the United Nations peacekeeping forces. In the issue between the Israelis and the Palestine peoples and Syria, we're, especially in the Golan Heights, until recently, we were also part of the peacekeeping force. In fact, whenever there's any issue that happens anywhere in the world, the first question is, to my mind, is any Filipinos involved? And when I'm told none, I really breathe a very deep sigh of relief, because we have about 10 million of our population outside the country. Now, as to the question, the European Union, during the ASEM conference in Vientiane, Laos, we stated the proposition that everybody keeps saying in resolving the problems in the South China Sea, it should be based on international law. And our position has not changed, and we are saying that, again, arbitration is another means for doing so. And a lot of people in that particular conference were, shall we say, due to various reasons, keeping quiet about the issue, giving you the importance that this problem does not affect us. And it was the European Union who said, and who seconded the motion that we were making. And we were very grateful that they helped us to put it, in a sense, in the forefront of everybody's mind. And we think that was the correct position. There is an estimate that says 40% of global trade has to cross this particular ocean, which is the South China Sea. And if it gets us a situation where there is one state that determines who can and cannot pass through, and when not, and puts in all of the various rules and regulations, then it will undermine the global economy that is just now recovering. Okay. Now, also, we agree that all of the relationships should not be one way. When we have disputes with China and others, we tell them prosperity cannot exist in a vacuum. The imbalance will merit instability also. So we have to be focused on how to make it all-inclusive, not just within our communities, but elsewhere. So we agree with the position that perhaps there is limited opportunities for rapid growth in developed economies like that of Germany and other states in the European Union. And there is nothing that should preclude you from gaining more by joining the emergent economies. And of course, I have to plug the Philippines as a potential place for these gains, wherein there are synergies between our wants and needs and your capabilities that redound to both of us having the opportunity to gain benefits from the enhanced interaction.
Let me ask you one more question here on the stage, and then I would like to open the floor to our audience. We have all read the reports that Australia authorities have uncovered this terrorist plot from Islamist extremists in Australia. And I was a bit surprised that you did not address the issue of Islamist extremism in your speech, because it's clearly also an issue, I think, for your country. I think there are some estimates that more than 100 Filipinos are fighting for the Islamic State in Syria and in Iraq. And in the past, Al-Qaeda has provided some training for the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. So what, from your point of view, can be done to prevent the Islamic State to expand in Asia and more specifically to find followers in your own country?
Well, sir, in our case, the MILF, which probably had some links to Al-Qaeda before, is actually our partners in attaining peace for the Bangsamoro peoples, and have actually entered into an agreement with the national government, encompassed in an agreement called the Comprehensive Framework on the Bangsamoro. This has been translated into a law. The law is now before our Congress. We are waiting for its passage and a ratification and a plebiscite that will put the MILF in a governing role in the transition period leading up to the national elections. As partners, and eventually as people who will be responsible for the peace and order in that portion of the country, even now they have been helping us address the issues of, well, a lot of times bandits and sometimes potentially terrorists. They have publicly stated that they are not in support of what IS is doing, and they will prevent the IS's intrusion into Philippine affairs. Now, having said that, the same groups that were claiming linkage to Al-Qaeda, according to our intelligence reports, are the same people who are claiming that they are also now, they have pledged allegiance to the Caliph of the IS. And we presume not to belittle them, but if there is a new group that is ascendant, they will be probably the next franchisee in our country. Now, our problems, I think, are rooted more in issues of economic opportunities or lack of economic opportunities, rather than based on ideologies or even religious extremism. So, for instance, I'm not aware of any instance where we've had suicide bombers in the Philippines. That doesn't mean that we will not be subjected to the same. That doesn't mean that we don't have the potentials of being infiltrated by terrorists. But it is not within our culture to do so. And in our case, addressing the root causes of the problem, making them not disenchanted and disillusioned, will enhance our ability to insulate or at least protect our borders from influences that are nihilistic, I think, would be the best way to put it.
Okay, thank you very much. I would now like to use our time that we have left to invite you to ask a question or give us your view about a certain aspect of the politics and economical developments in the South China Sea. Please stand. We have 2 mics here in the room. And please introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, my name is Sert Ünaldi from Bertelsmann Stiftung. My question is about constitutional change in the Philippines. There has been a lot of talk on that issue in recent months, particularly on the issue of presidential term limits and also on a review of the role of the judiciary in the Philippines. And I would like to know what is your current stance on that issue. Thank you.
Sir, perhaps I can just concentrate on one of the issues that is closest to my heart, and that is not the presidential term limits. It is the question of judicial review. During our martial law period, whenever there were questions regarding the validity of imposing martial law, the court normally would say that is a political question, and they were not competent or not within their purview to decide or pass upon. The present constitution that we have, the 1987 constitution, has given the judiciary, which is a separate branch from the executive and the legislative, the authority and the obligation to examine grave abuses of discretion leading to no jurisdiction whatsoever. Now, our issue is that this is a power that should be used in restraint. Unfortunately, it's used rather, I should say, it's used too much. Then it seems that we have swung from one end to the other extreme, wherein before, they didn't want to interfere whatsoever. Now it seems they feel compelled to interfere in anything and everything. Amongst the issues stated by various quarters in my country is that our Supreme Court, being an appellate court, can decide, and being the Supreme Appellate Court, can decide whether or not to hear cases. And it seems that any case brought before them, they choose to hear, leading to quite a huge number of cases that they have to tackle, leading to the slow grinding of the wheels of justice. So the current Chief Justice is working on this program, as well as the other associate justices, of trying to address the needed reforms in our judicial system. But at the same time, perhaps to ensure that normally when you're in one position and you go to the extreme, if that initial position was wrong, the extreme normally is also wrong. And there is some healthy compromise. So what we're envisioning in this dialogue is find that healthy compromise that gives them the power to provide a check and balance, but doesn't lend itself to wanton use of a power that is very, very strong and very powerful.
Thank you. There were two questions here. Yeah, we take both together and then we do a final round.
Okay. Magandang hapon po, mahal na Pangulo. Ako po si Wilfred, estudyante po dito sa Berlin. My question is, I have two questions actually. First,
Can you please limit it to one?
okay,
Thank you.
I'll just limit it to one, but essentially it's two. First question, there's a growing regional military race in our area. I'd like to hear about that. I'd like to hear about your opinion about this military race. And also, do you believe that we need to further invest on our military?
Thank you. And we take another question and then you can take over.
Centenary Hilme, Fox Fellow at Yale University and a researcher here in Berlin. My question to Mr. President is that a growing economy needs some of the best and the brightest minds in the country. My question is, what is the long-term strategy of the Philippine government in attracting some of the best and the brightest Filipinos who are studying in Europe and the United States?
Okay, thank you.
I can answer the questions in the sequence that they were given. Militarily, do we need to join an arms race? The bottom line is, does the Philippines have any capability whatsoever at this point in time? And military to us has a dual role. For instance, when we're struck by disasters, a lot of times, especially for the far-flung areas, it's our military that gets to them and renders assistance and succor. Okay. Just to remind you, we have 132 naval ships covering the 36,000-kilometer coastline. And most of them were made when both of us were not even figments of imagination by our parents. You know? Okay. And we are actually proud that our maintenance people are able to keep them running despite the fact that they've, I think, gone to three times their useful life. Okay. But having said that, we really want to have, in the debate between guns and butter, we really want to devote most of the resources in butter, especially given the fact that a lot of our people are living below the poverty line, are deprived of so many things. But having said that, we really have to balance. No? If you have none of the wherewithal, how do you actually enforce fishery laws? How do you actually stop encouraging somebody, please push us around because there's nothing we can do? But having said that, do we want war? No. I think there is a consensus that it can never really have a good outcome. It can never produce good results. But it can never be a positive. But having said that, we really have to also have the right to exercise self-defense. Okay. The second question is, how do we bring back the best and the brightest? You know, to be honest with you, are the head of see, sorry, I have to ask what his discipline is. And the degree is Dr. Mahar Lagmay. Well, one of the scientists that we have gotten back, Dr. Mahar Lagmay, actually had a very good job in America, saw the need in the country, motivated by patriotism and definitely not by the pay scale, decided to come home, and he's actually head of the project called NOAA, or national organizational awareness on hazards. This is the scheme that put in all of the sensors in the 18 major river basins that allows us to have at least a 6-hour window between flooding and it's coming to particular communities. When we started out, we found out that we didn't have a meteorology degree in any of our colleges. There are several now that are offering it. Teachers, no? I'm sure you know that domestic helpers, no? Started out as being trained as teachers in the Philippines, wound up in that job. There are, I understand, 300 already who are finishing their contracts, who have qualified for teachers, who will now populate our expanded K-12 program. I'm told anecdotally that other jobs, for instance, chefs on cruise lines that we used to fill, or assistant chefs, they're having difficulty recruiting the same because the disparity in wages of what they can earn back home and what they can earn on these cruise ships has shrunk, so that the loneliness aspect, the enforced separation, the distance from home, etc., is not compensated by the smaller difference in earnings on that ship and ours. But at the end of the day, the goal still, when you leave the country, it's by choice and it's not by necessity. And I think that the 1.6 million new jobs we generated, if I'm not mistaken, last year, I have to apologize. This is close to my 60th engagement from last week of total of 86. And then also moving 2.5 million out of the poverty line, are indicative of increasing opportunities within the country. We think this is just the beginning steps. No? All the investments, especially in education, which will take time, will pan out in the next years, to reach full maturation. And to get there, of course, at the end of the day, we rely on our people.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our discussion this afternoon. I would like to ask you to remain seated until the President has left the room. After the event, we would like to invite you all for a small reception. And I would like to thank President Aquino very much for delivering his speech and also especially in engaging a discussion with us. I hope that we will be able to welcome you once again in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.